What I'm about to present to you in this video is by no means conclusive, but it is highly unusual. And the last time we saw scientific data like this out of this geophysical observation station in Tomsk, Russia, we had 4 days later the strongest earthquake that we've had since 2023, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake in Turkey, also a magnitude 7.5 earthquake, and a whole bunch of magnitude 6s, 5s, and 4s. It was an entire earthquake swarm, devastated that region. I've actually been there since. Gaziantep in Turkey is very close to those earthquake epicenters. I was in fact in Aswan when that earthquake occurred, and I had feverish symptoms right as that magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck off. This is in the middle of the night. It was very bizarre. I recovered once that earthquake swarm started to abate. It was out of the blue, a 12-hour kind of disturbance to my health. And during this period of time that we're seeing today, November 29th, with these unusual energy signals in our background electromagnetic field, once more out of Tomsk, Russia, I also had a really bad headache that came totally out of the blue. And so I'm N=1, but there are a lot of people who are bioelectrically sensitive. I seem to be someone very much connected to earth energies because I'm talking about them and studying them all the time. And we see these sort of signals connected to very powerful earthquakes, or it's hypothesized also volcanic eruptions, because both are electromagnetic phenomenon on Earth. We saw with the 2022 Hunga Tonga earthquake, a massive electrical impulse in the background, Schumann resonances, similar to what we are seeing here. But these signals are very reminiscent of what we saw out of Tomsk, Russia back in February of 2023. It's possible that we have a very significant Earth energetic event coming up just in the next few days. It could be at any point from now going forward. The other thing that is bizarre about this is that with this earthquake sequence that we had in Turkey in 2023, we had a full moon. That full moon aligned with the Earth and the Sun right at the exact same time that we had that earthquake. And so you had this additional gravity vector, additional gravitational force. We know that there are stronger tides, especially during new moons and full moons, because the moon is aligned with that gravity vector. And it just so lined up that we had that 7.8 earthquake in Turkey basically at the exact same time as the full moon at maximum illumination. And what do we know? We have a new moon coming up December 1st. So literally just like a day or two away as I'm filming this. So this whole sequence very much seems to rhyme, though I'm sure it's not going to be an exact repetition. We don't know what's going to happen, but I'm presenting this data for you so you can have a better understanding of the Earth energies currently at play right now, because we know that the Earth acts unusual, you could say, at times. There is a plethora of scientific research on how background electromagnetic fields alter in response to earthquakes and volcanic activity, either before, during, or after. We know that we see ionospheric disturbances before, during, and after earthquakes, VLF emissions, air conductivity changes. The Earth is electromagnetic. It's the global electric circuit. And so when you see very startling energetic changes like this in the background electromagnetic field, you know something's up. So what exactly that is, I cannot say, but this is looking very reminiscent to early February of last year with that double high magnitude 7 earthquake sequence in Turkey. And so let's look at the data. Before we get back to the data that's showing these unusual energy waves that appeared today, November 29th, 2024, we have to first understand what the Schumann resonances are, because that is the part of the light spectrum that they are showing up in. The Schumann resonances are extremely low frequency standing waves of light energy that are naturally resonant with the Earth because of her physical dimensions. And so you have Schumann resonances produced by a variety of electromagnetic phenomenon here on Earth. It's a part of the global electric circuit. Most notably, lightning strikes create Schumann resonances. There are about 50 lightning strikes occurring every single second. This is a broad enough, distributed enough power source to feed energy into the Schumann resonances such that they are stable frequencies of light measurable across the entire globe from the near surface out into the upper atmosphere, even into the ionosphere. You can measure them in the oceans, you can measure them in Earth's surface. So they connect all the different geophysical layers together, and they are connected to them in a variety of ways. You have ionospheric disturbances changing the parameters of the Schumann resonances. You have ionospheric sunrise, where the sun hits the ionosphere before the surface. That increases the charge of the ionosphere. That produces Schumann resonances. Our brain produces Schumann resonances. And so they are this global energy field that exists at higher power levels than nearby frequencies because their wavelengths are harmonic to the circumference of the Earth itself. And that's very simple. You have the circumference of the Earth at 40,000 kilometers. You have the speed of light at about 300,000 kilometers per second. You do the math, you get a frequency of 7.5 hertz. Observationally, we see that the foundational mode of the Schumann resonance on average is 7.8 hertz. And so these are just a natural energy consequence of Earth's geophysical system and the global electric circuit. They've been in existence for, we theorize, billions of years. They are connected in a variety of ways that we definitely do not fully understand yet to energetic phenomenon like earthquakes, volcanoes, space weather impacts, and so much more. Let's look at the data. Once again, we're looking at our recent Schumann resonances data. This is a spectrogram showing the amplitude of the 0 to 40 hertz background vertical electric field out of Tomsk, Russia. This data is collected by the Technical University there. They publish it online. And so we can see what's happening in the background vertical electric field out of Tomsk, Russia. Now it's important to note that you will have local atmospheric phenomenon show up in the data as well as global phenomenon. And this spectrogram really nicely shows that because here we have local cloud-based weather activity likely from a small thunderstorm or perhaps some snow. It is very cold there right now, and so that typically shows up at these vertical white bars of higher power amplitude. We see our power legend there on the right, and we see our Schumann resonances here going across. And so we see mode 1 there at about 7.8 hertz, mode 2 at 14, mode 3 at 20, mode 4 about 25, 26. Mode 5 and mode 6 show up very, very, very faintly on this data here because they apply a filter past 32 hertz to reduce the overall gain. And so we see that the blue there is our low amplitude and white is our highest amplitude. So the first 4 modes show up really nicely. Now again, this is a local cloud-based weather phenomenon there. And just to the right of it are these extremely unusual signals that we observed just in the past 24 hours. They had a very long duration, over 13 hours. And what characterizes these signals is A, they are at a higher amplitude than normal. You see this part is usually typically very low in amplitude based on the color. And B, we're seeing that the frequency of the signal is changing, which is very bizarre. Because typically, as you can see with our Schumann resonances, their frequency range is stable, going from about 7 to 9 hertz for mode 1, 13 to 15 hertz for mode 2. But these signals here showing up in the same background vertical electric field, 0 to 40 hertz, are in frequencies that are not resonant with the Earth, though they are overlapping a little bit with these 2 modes of the Schumann resonances in this part of the frequency spectrum. But they are at higher powers and the frequency is changing across time. Very bizarre. So this is set for UTC time. On the website, it is UTC +7. I've converted it over to make it a little bit more universal for everybody. Here we see the first signal showing up. I can zoom in right there at about 0030 AM UTC, and then it quickly decreases in frequency. We go here, we see frequency 0 at top, 40 down below. So this is starting out at about 36 hertz and then decreases to about 30 hertz, stays there, but has this pulse characteristic because we see the amplitude drop out right there and right there, in addition to right there, right? It's not a continuous signal like we've seen other times with pre-earthquake phenomenon, but in general, it shows this increase in the frequency there. So there's these intermittent outbursts of electromagnetic energy at these frequencies and also at these above. And so it's across multiple parts of the background electric field going from 0 to 40 hertz. And we probably have these resonances also popping up at higher frequencies, though we only have this data going to 40 hertz out of Tomsk, Russia. 13 hours. It's a very unusual, very long signal duration. And the last time we saw these signals was 4 days before the magnitude 7.8 earthquake and magnitude 7.5 earthquake in Turkey, and also during and after those. We saw that data. We're going to give it another look in just a second. But this right here is most often seen with land-based phenomenon. There are a lot of different studies on that. We have a bunch of studies out of Japan looking at Schumann resonance pre-earthquake signals. We also have studies out of the Bay Area. We had pre-earthquake signals with the Loma Prieta earthquake. That was measured from just miles away in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We also have pre-earthquake signals with the Kiki earthquake and with earthquakes on the Alum Rock Fault in San Jose. And so this is a common phenomenon that just needs more observation stations for us to really study in depth and to be able to understand it to a better degree. But what was observed out of Japan is that these earthquake signals typically only appear before, during, or after land-based earthquakes. Because if this earthquake epicenter is under seawater, seawater being very conductive, absorbs all that energy. So the only time that they saw this sort of signal with an earthquake epicenter underneath the ocean was when it was a very strong earthquake and the ocean column depth was very low. So effectively it was a very small cap of water that was not sufficient to absorb all this electromagnetic energy, because magnetic fields are absorbed into conductive mediums. They like to propagate through resistive mediums because there's very low conductivity. The magnetic field can propagate very easily. And so when we have these sort of signals show up and we're measuring them in Tomsk, Russia, we are looking at some sort of land-based electromagnetic phenomenon occurring, likely of a deep origin. We are also looking at possible ionospheric disturbances, because when you have the height of the ionosphere changing, that alters the waveguide of the Schumann resonances, and therefore they can have these frequency alterations. But again, what we're seeing here are not Schumann resonances. So this is likely not related to an ionospheric disturbance. I also did check the data from the website, sosrff.tsu.ru. They didn't show any ionospheric disturbances. They also measure that with an ionospheric sonde. So we're looking at most likely electromagnetic energy that is coming out of the Earth due to very powerful telluric currents propagating through Earth's surface. Let's talk about it. Electric currents running through Earth's surface are known as telluric currents, and they produce magnetic fields. This is very basic physics. An electric current will create a magnetic field, and the orientation of that will be via the right-hand rule. And so if you have a horizontal electric current going this way, you have a magnetic field that's produced going in that direction and also going down below. Whether you can observe that magnetic field that's being produced depends on a variety of factors. It depends on the strength of the electric current, it depends on the depth of the electric current, and it depends on the conductivity characteristics of the subsurface. If it's highly conductive, then it's very likely for that magnetic field to get reabsorbed into the subsurface before it expresses itself at the surface where we have instrumentation to be measurable in a way above background noise levels. But if you have extremely powerful telluric currents and the depth is pretty close to the surface, it's not that far down, and you have fairly resistive geology, then you can get these really strong electromagnetic emissions that appear at the surface. And we have a lot of data for that before, during, and after earthquakes. We saw that sequence back in February of 2023 with pre-earthquake signals out of Tomsk, Russia. Those two earthquakes, they were not under the ocean, they were on land. And so even though Tomsk, Russia is like 4,000 kilometers away from the epicenter of that earthquake swarm in Turkey, it still was able to observe these pre-earthquake signals, very similar to right now. So let's look at the data from 2023. So here we have our data from 2023 showing the pre-earthquake signals that we observed in Tomsk, Russia back on February 2nd, and then also the earthquake signal that occurred right as that 7.8 earthquake struck. That is the exact time in UTC, and we see this energy stream start right at the moment of rupture, and it has this very similar characteristics where it's higher power than the background spectrum, and it has this frequency modulation. So the frequency starts at a higher frequency, then goes to a lower frequency, and then goes and increases again. We see a very faint one right there, and then we see a lower frequency one there also hidden in some of this noise. But back on February 2nd, we saw very similar signals, and at that moment in time when that occurred, I saw this before on February 2nd, 2023. I didn't know what they were. They were very bizarre. Never seen anything like that. Of course, 4 days later, I figured it out, but at the time, this was like a, what is this? And I'm pretty sure I made a video on that. But we see very similar characteristics, not as long in duration as the ones that we're seeing now, which could indicate that what we have coming is going to be even more significant than this 7.8 earthquake that we had in Turkey. And then there was a 7.5, a whole earthquake swarm, but still the strongest earthquakes that we've had since then. You can also see down here that our qualities spiked dramatically. This is also known as Q factor, and this is a very important measurement to understand what we are talking about, because this is really demonstrating Earth resonance amplification. We're going to talk about that next with our current data slide. But I want you to look at these values. We had, for these pre-earthquake signals there, a quality factor of 250 for mode 3, which is right about here. And we see a quality factor of 59 for mode 4, which is about typically 25, 26 hertz. And those are the modes, mode 3, mode 4, that 20 to 30 hertz range that typically sees big increases in power before, during, or after earthquakes. That research is out of Japan and other places, but that is a frequency range that seems to be connected to earthquakes. We see these quality factors went up dramatically 4 days before that massive earthquake swarm in Turkey. And we see here the full moon. Right there is when we had the full moon, February 5th, late in universal time. And within just less than 24 hours, we had that really big earthquake sequence. So it was a seemingly convergence of events that happened for back in 2023 with this Turkey-Syria earthquake sequence. We saw the data beforehand. At the time, I did not know that this is going to lead to that, but I did see the unusual quality factors. Normally, they never go above 20. So if you see anything over 50 or 100, that really should wake you up. That's what we have happening right now. Once again, we have our vertical electric field spectrogram going from 0 to 40 hertz out of Tomsk, Russia. This is our recent time window here. You can see these very unusual energy signals. Again, very reminiscent of the ones that we saw out of Tomsk, Russia 4 days before the 7.8 earthquake in Turkey, and also during and after that earthquake. So very unusual. These are longer duration than those ones, and they are very similar in their frequency change across time, their amplitude. Very bizarre Earth energies. We just don't know what they are. We get a better sense of what they are by looking at our Q factor. Q factor is a measure of the resonance of an energy field. So Q factor elevates in value when the ratio between power in an energy system to its dissipation increases. So you have amplitude, power, strength, intensity, all effectively words talking about the same thing. You have just the overall power of a wave or an energy signal. That does not tell you, though, if it's dissipating out quickly or whether it's resonating and, propagating out very losslessly for a long time. It just tells you the power of that wave. Frequency just tells you how many times it's cycling per second. It kind of tells you it's attenuation because a higher frequency wave in general attenuates out faster than a low frequency wave, but it doesn't tell you whether it has found a nice resonance mechanism because we know that can occur. Q factor is what tells you that. Again, it's the ratio between power and dissipation. And so when there's an increase in Q factor, this is either done because there was an increase in power or a decrease in attenuation or both simultaneously. So in effect, when Q factor goes up dramatically, we're looking at a phenomenon known as resonance amplification. Normal Q factors for the Schumann resonances are less than 20, but they can increase in greater than 100 when Earth energy resonance amplification is underway. Look at the values here. 48 for mode 4 at 25-26 hertz. We have 190 for mode 3 at 20 hertz. 120 for mode 2 at 14 hertz. Mode 1, the foundational mode, we don't often see that changing with these sort of energetic phenomenon or as a pre-earthquake signal measure. And so we see its Q factor is normal, at normal range, no real change there, but it's the higher modes which are displaying these changes, and you see them isolated to these higher amplitude parts of this entire frequency energy sweep there, you could say. So extremely bizarre increases in the Q factor. Resonance amplification is what we're seeing here. Effectively what that is you have energy in a system and it is in general vibrating because energy is vibration. And if you have more energy coming into that system, it can now vibrate stronger and stronger and stronger. And if the dissipation in that system is very low, then you can have this amplification occur where it just grows and grows and grows. And everyone's experienced this to some degree. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge is a great example out of Washington. The wind was at the right resonant frequency for that bridge, and so the resonance amplification increased until the bridge actually collapsed. But you can do that when you press against something and you kind of find that resonance like a tree or a tree branch. So you can find its frequency, push against it at the right, and it'll keep building and building and building because the energy isn't dissipating. And you're adding more energy to it right when it's at that critical moment. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing Earth energy resonance amplification, and this is being measured in Tomsk, Russia. We don't know how close Tomsk, Russia is to the epicenter of this, where the critical stress is in the Earth or in general the anomaly, the Earth energy anomaly. We don't know where that is. We do know that in Turkey, that was about 4,000 kilometers away from Tomsk. And so in general, I say there's a 4,000 kilometer window or 5,000 kilometer window around Tomsk, Russia where this can occur. Let's give Google Earth a look. Here we have Google Earth and we can see Tomsk, Russia here with this yellow pin up in Siberia. This is where they observe this data out of the space observing system. Here we see those two earthquakes from Turkey back in 2023. This is the magnitude 7.8 epicenter. This is the magnitude 7.5 that occurred about 9 hours later. And so we can measure going from the Turkey earthquakes to Tomsk, Russia to get a sense of that distance. And there it is, about 4,000 kilometers. And so even from 4,000 kilometers away, this observation station was able to measure energetic phenomenon there. And it's really kind of an unknown why, but we saw those pre-earthquake signals. We saw that energy stream that occurred right as that earthquake was happening. I had my own experience where I was down in Aswan and I was feverish right as those earthquakes were popping off, and right as they finished up, I felt fine. Very bizarre. So if we have Tomsk, Russia here, and we select our tool to be 4,000 kilometers, we see that we get all of China here. We get up into Siberia. We get all the way over to Turkey. We get all the way to Poland, down into the Middle East, even down into India, like Mumbai there. And we also start hitting some big fault zones here off the coast of Malaysia and into Southeast Asia with that kind of 4,000 kilometer radius. So in general, it looks like if there was to be an earthquake connected to these pre-earthquake signals, or just these energetic signals that we're seeing, it would be somewhere in this zone here along a notable fault zone. That's the most likely place to accommodate a very powerful fault. Let's give our fault map a look. Here is our USGS data for magnitude 6 earthquakes and greater. Going from January 1st of 2023, you'll see top of the list is that 7.8 earthquake out of Turkey. And then we had some other very powerful earthquakes that have occurred since then. But that is the strongest earthquake that we've had since the beginning of 2023. Tomsk is around here. And so we see our fault lines there. We have one running through the Middle East. We have these faults as well, but we're looking at land-based faults. We have faults here. We have the fault along the southern base of the Himalayas. Going down here, we have these faults in Southeast Asia, but they are subduction trenches primarily, and we typically don't see these sort of very powerful signals before earthquakes if they are epicentered underneath the ocean. And so it looks like we also have faults over here in Russia. We've had a bunch of earthquakes, as you can see here, magnitude 6 and greater along the Kamchatka Peninsula. This is a magnitude 7 that coincided with a volcanic eruption at the same time, fueled by a geomagnetic storm. That was very interesting. Covered that on the channel. So whether or not these energy signals that we're seeing out of Tomsk, Russia end up being connected to an earthquake, whether they are a warning signal, that is yet to be determined. It's impossible to know, but it's possible. It's very possible. Knowing what we know, that very well could be the case. It very well could be a warning signal, and I'd say it's these faults here in East Siberia, and the faults near India, and the faults in the Middle East that are most likely to accommodate a very, very powerful earthquake, sufficient to generate those sort of signals that are then picked up by the observatory in Tomsk, Russia. Again, I would like to make it clear that these energy signals that we've just recently seen in the past 24 hours out of Tomsk, Russia, they are by no means a guarantee that we have a large geophysical event to occur in the near future, the next few days. That is by no means guaranteed. But we have seen these sort of signals before, very powerful energetic phenomenon before. It is my responsibility and duty to present this information to you. That is one of the ethos of my channel. When we see very weird things happening geophysically, I present that. When there's big solar flares and coronal mass ejections and things of that nature, I present that so you can be aware of the changing energies on our planet. And so we will just have to see how this pans out. I walked through all my reasoning for you in this video, but again, I'm not saying that we have something guaranteed to occur in the next few days. We do have that new moon coming up December 1st, December 2nd, and so that would increase the probability of some sort of earthquake event because of that additional gravitational influence right along that sun-earth line from the moon, but we just don't know. So I want to make that very, very clear, but please be just prepared, I would say. I find it unusual that I had this very powerful headache come out of nowhere during this energy sequence there. I did not know of this at the time, but I did my math for when I had my headache is from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific time. And I looked at this and it's right in this window right there. And so it lines up perfectly with that energy signal. Again, kind of out of the blue thing. I'm an n=1. But I also had those fever symptoms right before and during that 7.8 earthquake in Turkey. And I was just nearby in Egypt. So I don't know. But just please be mindful of your own energies. And if you've been feeling any sort of earth energy disturbances yourself, please share that in the comments below. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Thank you all so much for watching. I will keep you up to date with what is happening. I check all these different data feeds all the time. So if you'd like to stay appraised with what's happening energetically here on Earth, with the sun, solar activity, also with our solar system and cosmos, then please subscribe. I'm your cosmic space weatherman, Earth geophysicist, and so much more. Happy to support you with that. Hope to see you around. Wishing you all well. Let us pray for peace and energetic harmony here on our planet at this moment in time. We can do that together. Please, please, please do that. I'll be doing that over the next few days. It seems that we really need to be doing that right now. This is a preeminent signal of some sort that we've received from the Earth, and one that we've only received before very strong, powerful, energetic events. So please pray for peace and harmony. Thank you so much. Wishing you all well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.